shaken. I will have a firm foundation. That one just really just chokes me up because, it's talking about praising God regardless of the storm, regardless of how it is you're feeling at the moment. And, I just feel pretty beat up. So some of you already know, but some of you don't know that on Monday, I found out I have liver disease. And I have what's called NASH disease. So it's right before you get to cirrhosis of the liver. And I was so angry, like, for the past 2 days because I'm like, how unfair is that? Like, I haven't touched a drop of alcohol in 13 years and still ended up with liver disease. Doesn't seem quite fair. And so that song that we sang about praising him in the midst of how you're feeling, praising him in your storm, praising him in the midst of your difficulties, it really speaks volumes. Really does. So it humbled me. It reminded me that it is what it is. God's still who he is. God's still who he is. And that's what I have to cling to and have to remind myself of. So with that being said, today's sermon is called Humility Will Result in Honor. So we're going to read from James 4, verses 1 through 10. Here's what it says. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose it is to no purpose that the scripture says, he yearns jealousy over the spirit that he has made to dwell in us? Verse 6, but he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Heavy stuff. Yikes. There's a lot going on in those 10 verses. So in verses 1 through 5, James goes in about people fighting with each other. He talks about coveting other people's things. He talks about the danger of putting people before God. He talks about pride, in essence, in the first 5 verses without specifically mentioning pride just yet. And I'm going to unpack what that looks like later on. In verses 6 through 10, he talks of humility. He was pretty straightforward about 6 through 10. So let's break down what pride and what humility looks like. So let's start with pride. Verse 1, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war with you? So I used to be a Facebook warrior. Not warrior like worry, but like warrior. Like a fighter. Yeah. So if someone said something crazy, or if I knew the answer to something, I just had to let people know how smart I am. I just had to. Heaven forbid someone got an attitude with me or was rude with me. Oh my gosh, I would cut them down so quick their head would spin. I could be meaner than a viper. And here's the thing, if I just be completely honest, it was because of pride. It was because of pride. It was because I just had to be right. I had to be heard. And how dare anyone disrespect me? Do they not know who I am? See, I'm letting you guys in on what goes on inside Uni's brain. I may not say it out loud. Yeah, fix my crown, right? All right? The queen is walking by. Don't you know? Like, this is what goes through my brain, though. It's a battle. It's a battle between my pride and between humility. And here's the thing, like, it starts to take its toll on you emotionally. It started to drain me. And so one day I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And so occasionally I still have to check myself, and I have to make sure that my pride isn't creeping up, causing fights. Because essentially that's what our pride does. It's a battle between what you say and what I say, and because I have to be right, that means that my pride is coming through. Because who says we always have to be right? And if we always have to be right, and if we are right, who says we have to tell the other person that we're right? I do. My pride does. Verses 2 through 3. You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you don't ask. So, when I was a kid, I was actually kind of stingy. Does that surprise anybody? Yeah. So, I have 7 other siblings by my biological dad, and I did not grow up with them. 2 of them, I don't even know. Never even met them. I basically grew up the only child with my mom for 18 years. And the thing is, I hated sharing my toys. Like, I have these vivid memories of specific toys that were my favorite. Like, and it's so funny because we were just talking about one of them the other day. I had this little treasure troll that had roller skates on it. And my mom is terrified of treasure trolls. And so I used to turn it on and put it in the middle of the night and turn it on into the hallway and let it skate down the hallway. And she would just freak out. But don't let any other kid touch my toys. I had so many toys that I remember one time my mom got mad at me because I wouldn't clean my room, so she threw out half of them. And that still didn't even touch how many I had. I still had a room full of toys. I guess that's what happens when you're the only kid, So I had this mind mentality, like, this is mine. Everything's mine. And so I didn't like sharing. And the other kids, my neighborhood kids, they would share their toys with me, but I wanted their toys too. I wasn't grateful for the toys I had. I wanted what they had. And so I would get mean, and I would be mean to them, and I would do stuff to them. Like, I would pinch them and stuff. I was terrible. And it was all because I had this sense of entitlement. The thing is, really deep down, it's just the beginnings of pride. Entitlement is so closely connected to pride, it's scary. And sometimes we don't even think about it. And so you have this mentality of, I deserve this, so it's mine. That's pride, and you've got that whole little entitlement going on. Have you ever met someone who was entitled? Whew. They are not fun to be around, and it tries every ounce of my patience. Every ounce of my patience, I'm telling you. So one time, the church I used to pastor, I did a back-to-school drive. And so we had this whole shebang set up where we had all the backpacks, and then we had individual school supplies so they could go to different rooms and pick up different items from the different rooms. We even had hot dogs and chips. And so, it was a really big thing. And this was the first one that I had put together. And just to see the look on all of these people's faces, they were so grateful. They were happy to be there. But one person, she came in late, and there weren't any backpacks left. We still had the other supplies, but we didn't have any of the backpacks left. And this woman flipped her lid. Keep in mind, we're standing in a church, and she cussed me out, and I'm the pastor. And I don't mean like she was just saying words, like she cussed me out. Like it made my head spin. And then not only did she do that, but then she turned around and she swiped the whole counter of supplies into her bag and stormed out. Didn't take one or two. She swiped the whole counter off. Just I was like, whoa, what is this? And somebody nodded at me and was like, Inner City Ministry. And I was like, is it now? But you know what that was? That was a sense of pride. That's what that was. That was that sense of entitlement. And it didn't matter. An entitled person, they feel like they're more significant than anyone else. And so they like to take what's theirs, what's not theirs, and they walk around with this chip on their shoulder. Philippians 2:3 says it this way. It says, "Do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." It's about being considerate of others. It wasn't considerate of her to swipe the counter, and it wasn't considerate of her to cuss me out over it. But you get the point. You can see how pride can look different, because pride doesn't always look like how people think pride looks. Pride is deceptive, and it creeps in those odd little ways, even through entitlement. So let's move on to our last point, which is humility. After all, this sermon is called Humility Will Result in Honor. So this is verses 6-7 and verse 10. "But he gives more grace. Therefore," it says, "God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you." So what is humility? There's a lot of wonky teachings about humility. Humility can be summed up as submitting yourself to God. That's what humility is, on the surface level and on a deep level. But when you take it a little bit deeper, you'll uncover that there's a lot of misconceptions about humility. So, like, for example, people for some reason like to, and I call it false humility. People like to think, well, you can't share your talents. You ever met someone who is genuinely good at something, and you're like, "You're good at this," and they're like, "Oh, no." They downplay it. That's false humility. No, if you're good at it, you're good at it. God gave you gifts to use. He created us excellent. He created us to pursue, and to get better and to learn and to grow. And so it's okay that you use those gifts that he gave you. And so people act like being humble is denying that you're gifted. And it's not. God gave us these gifts. And so, like 1 Corinthians chapter 12, for example, verses 4-6, here's what it says. "There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work." So he gave us each unique gifts. And it bothers me when people have this false humility because they tear themselves down. And that's not being humble. God doesn't want us to debase ourselves. He doesn't want us to think so terribly about ourselves, because that's a slap in his face. Because what did it say when he created humanity? It said that he created them good. They were good. You're good. And to think less of yourself is false humility. But humility, true humility, is thinking rightly of yourself. It's being honest about where you are. It's being honest about who you are. So if you're good at something, you're good at something. If you're bad at something, you genuinely are. I'm terrible at math. I'm bad at math. It is what it is. It's a correct understanding of who I am. And so when you express your gifts and your talents, keep that in mind. When you're walking through life and you have passions and you have things that you excel at, don't think that that's wrong, because it's not. And so when we start feeling better about ourselves than others, now that's pride. So if we start to pretend to be superior to others, that's pride. And in Proverbs 22:4, humility is the fear of the Lord, is what it says. Its wages are riches and honor and life. So I'm going to say that again. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. Now, fear in this context, for those of you who don't know, it just means utmost respect. Not as you would fear spiders. Not as if you feel spiders, it's going to get me. But rather, fear meaning in a reverence, a deep, unmovable respect for the nature and character of God. It's having respect for God is what will bring honor to us. Does that make sense? Y'all following me? So respecting the Lord looks like obedience to his word. It looks like viewing and treating people as equals, not looking down on folks. And we see this in Romans 12:16, where it says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited, and don't brag about it. Classic example of this. And sometimes people do this with complete, they're not doing it. I know one person I've seen do this, and he didn't do it to be prideful. He genuinely was so excited to help someone that he didn't even think how his actions would actually affect them. So, example I'm going with is someone taking pictures of themselves with the homeless while they're doing homeless things. Jeez, I'm posing for the camera. You see what I want the world to see what I'm doing right now. And so, I go back to that voice, and in our James passage where it says to humble yourself before God and he will honor you. Humility brings honor from God. And so when we think about it, it's like the world doesn't need to see our good acts. God sees it. And that is the reward. And scriptures go as far to even say, like, if you get a pat on the back from humanity, if they give you an attaboy, you just received your reward. Versus, if you're doing things discreetly, God sees what you've done in secret, and then he rewards you in heaven. I'll take that reward in heaven any day. But you can see how pride can get tangled up into that at times. Because we want those attaboys. We want those pats on the backs. And I'm not beating anybody up, because I like pats on the backs. That's something I deal with. We all like it, as we want to hear good job. We want people to know we care about other people, right? But sometimes we've just got to make sure it's not the pride creeping in, and we have to try to be discreet when we can. And so the context is honoring God and others by being respectful and genuine. So humility brings honor from God. So I'm going to close and ask this question: where are you being humble in your life, and where do you see pride? Let's end with a benediction. Would you guys stand for it if you're ready? Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen.